And welcome, everybody. Thank you very, very much for coming to this this seminar. As Danny's just working out the magic of the magic Mighty Mouse here. Let me just zoom that back for you. There we are, like this. Got a very, very exciting presentation for you guys today because, as you know, for the first time in this year's challenge, we introduced the concept of potentially selling your website as one of the ways that you can make $1. And that was inspired by a student that did the challenge the year before, Danny Batelic, who has gone on and done some amazing things with buying and selling websites. And I think what I want to focus on today, though, is we're certainly going to get to some really hardcore tips and strategies as well, but I think also you'll be very interested to hear just his story. You know, the fact that he could get over his handicaps, such as being a drummer, a Manchester United supporter, just overcoming those two things alone, let alone anything else that is a handicap for him, and to be able to do what he's done. I'm just getting in my shots now before he takes over. But I think it's very interesting. I think people love to hear stories of other challenges, and Danny is very much that. So we've got a great presentation here for you today. Danny's going to be driving, and I'll be chipping in with the special comments. Great introduction and welcome, Danny.
Thank you, Ed. And it's Ed, isn't it?
Yeah.
Thanks, Ed, and welcome, everyone. Today, I want to talk about, basically my story of how I went through the challenge and discovered this wonderful world of buying and selling websites, and how I actually turned it into a full-time business, and documented the whole process and put it in a little bit of a course that I want to show you later on. So I'll let Daffy start us off. Now, the reason Daffy's with us today, when I was a kid, I wanted so much to be Bugs Bunny. Everything I did ended up being Daffy Duck. And I realized after a number of years I get things wrong. And the only way to avoid all this stuff is to start working on systems. And I applied this to my drumming and thought, well, if I get a system happening with everything and stick to that system, I'm actually going to head towards Bugs territory and not be so much Daffy and getting things wrong. So today, I think I should really just start with my story of where I've come from. I spent most of my life as a drummer. Being a drummer, it's
Thankless.
Yeah, well, there's a joke, you don't. It's not the drummer's Porsche out the front of the pub. It's always the singer and the guitarist. So the last band I was in about 2 years ago, we were looking at how to promote our music online, and we saw this as a great opportunity as a band, thinking that music wasn't really selling in CD format as much as it wanted to, it used to, I should say. And as a band, we made a decision that, look, let's explore the whole online thing. It's an untapped market to a large degree for the position we're in, being a young local band, and how do we build up a following? Now, being a drummer, I could barely turn on a computer. I can.
Well, let's face it, walking and talking at the same time is tricky, and
exactly. Counting to four is the job description. So, in my pursuit of, look, how do I make this happen online? I came across the challenge 2 years ago, and I loved the idea of, in 30 days we can make your first $1, which at the time that would have been my only $1 in those 30 days. So I went through the challenge process and applied it to a CD we had made, and used all the steps in the challenge that you would apply to building websites and online presence to the band, and it did really well. We released the CD as a free download online, and it went crazy. We crashed our server twice, which was fantastic. We moved a ton of product. We started playing really good shows around Melbourne, and it went really well. And after a while, the band kicked me out and moved on. We parted ways. They're doing really well. They're about to release their next album.
But let's face it, it's a bit like Peter Gabriel leaving Genesis sort of situation.
Well, it is. It's, I've done well on my own. but I still, and the reunion show's coming up in 15 years.
Yeah.
We're all still around. But the thing that got me with the challenge was, I think, Ed, you mentioned, and it was the first time, almost as an afterthought on the challenge years ago, there's this great marketplace called Flipper, where you can move on any of the websites that you basically wanted to sell. So I was making a couple of websites as part of the challenge process as well, and I thought, well, let's see what happens. And I actually, oddly enough, had a drumming website that I'd put together, and it was earning a bit of income. But I thought, look, let's explore what happens. Put it onto Flipper, and I sold it the next day for $500. And I thought, oh, wow, there's something to this. So there was another website I was working on. I popped that on Flipper, and that's when reality hit. It didn't sell for very much at all. So I went back and thought, well, why did this one sell? And I studied Flipper for a while, just see the patterns and what people were doing, and thought, okay, these sorts of sites are selling. So I went out and made sites that were selling on Flipper at the time.
That's such an important thing, though, because I see so many times where one of the most dangerous things that can happen to you online, I reckon, is actually have a really good success first off. A bit like gambling too. Like if you sit down at the roulette table and you have a really big win, it's the worst thing that can happen to you, because you don't realize that the standard thing to happen is for stuff not to do so well. And so it was very good of you to think, okay, well, let's analyze this. Let's go back to steps. What was the difference, and what were the thing, and applying the same discipline of learning how to play drums professionally to also do that with your with your buying and selling websites.
Exactly. It came back to the Daffy Duck intro. It's get back to the systems. Find the system of what works and make it work. I'm not, I'm a drummer. I'm a pretty simple guy. All jokes aside, it's just my thought process is, if I've got a map of how to get to somewhere, I'll follow it and stay with it. It's a problem I have. I'm talking to some friends who happen to be classical musicians, so they're a bit brighter than your average rock star, but they, they always, uber intelligent people always want to get to the innovative stage, which is the last stage of learning.
Yeah.
But a lot of people say, I want to start there, and then they invariably end up back at.
Yeah. How can I make modifications to the system? I think I can do this better.
Exactly. When I started playing drums, I came in to my first drum teacher and said, I want to go boom. I don't want to play. No, you're going to sit there and go tap, tap, tap. No. Where do I get to the tap, tap? And that's the whole thing of systems. So I developed this system, and I was selling these websites, and we're talking about $500, $600 market, and it did really well. Then I thought, there's got to be more return for what I'm doing, the time I'm investing. So then I looked at buying existing websites that I could build out, renovate, and in turn sell for more money. So, and that system worked for a while, and it was selling, and I thought, well, what's next? Because once you master a system, like back to playing an instrument, once you've got something, a handle on something, you own that. That's part of you now. All you can do is scale that. But let's look at what's next.
Yeah.
So for me, and this was when Kenny Goodman came to Melbourne last year and spoke about domaining, and to re-emphasize the whole thing, I knew nothing about all this stuff when I started. So everything to me, I had no idea that you could buy and sell websites. Yeah,
so let's put this in some time perspective for people, because I think it's really interesting for fellow challengers just to see, you started out in the, so it was the 2009 challenge, right? So 2009 challenge, you started, I mentioned I just like very briefly mentioned this is something.
It was in the closing.
Yeah, just like, here's like one, because it had just been released at that point.
It had,
so it was just very, very new, yeah. And so then I remember getting you up to speak a little bit at the, pulled you out of the crowd basically last February, because you'd been, you'd actually turned this into a bit of a system, which I thought was fascinating. And of course, as you say, if you get the basics right, it's then, and Kenny Goodman, who was a good friend and was teaching us in the challenge about domains and so on in this past year's challenge. Kenny's expertise in age domains is fantastic. So, so you met Kenny at that conference.
I did, and Kenny's presentation was on this very fact of how he buys, and I love the real estate analogy that really hit home, saying these web properties are very, very similar to real world properties, because the whole renovation process, and I really took that on board and learned that system and found some great domains. And when you know and that's the key to everything, is really the end game. You need to know what you're doing to get to where you want and why you're doing it. So I worked that out pretty quickly as being the key to everything I do. And so with Kenny's presentation, then talking to him at the bar at 4 a.m. with Leslie Rohde bouncing around.
Yes, Leslie Rohde will be back in town next week.
Talking about option B.
Yeah.
So got into that, and Kenny gave me some great advice. So I put that system into place, and that was working really well for me. But back to the initial problem where I started from, I came into all this with quite a bit of debt. I maxed out my credit cards, paying my share of the CD, and I knew that the biggest mistake I could make was having to make this work. Otherwise, I wouldn't pay bills. And when you come to it with that attitude, that's when people get really unstuck, when you think, I've got to make this work.
That is it's funny you mention that, because it was I was actually talking about that in a mentoring group a couple of weeks ago, and that it's been my experience, observation, just literally observing hundreds and hundreds of different people, and when they set themselves these arbitrary deadlines, and typically what happens, where I see this happen most, is people say, right, I'm going to burn the ships, I'm going to quit my job, I'm going to make this happen, I've got 6 months, I've got 6 months cash in the bank, I'm going to make this happen, this is it, internet marketing, this is what I'm going to do. And typically the first couple of months are awesome, like they're great, you've got time, you can catch up, you can listen to all of our great webinars that we do, in real time, instead of having to listen to them late at night or while you're jogging. And it's awesome, it's fantastic for the first couple of months. And then about halfway, just before the halfway mark, all of a sudden it's like, oh, hang on, it's only 3 months to go. And that's where it starts to, the pressure starts, you start putting pressure on yourself. And it was, to me, and what then happens is the pressure gets worse and worse, and you try to force stuff to happen, and you try to make stuff happen in that way. It is really, really tricky. And to me, bluntly, I've very, very rarely seen that Hail Mary situation of somebody having to replace their income in 4 weeks, and they actually do it. I've seen people do that, but it's when they're being completely zen and no pressure, because they've lucked into a great market and off they go. But it's not when they're in that pressure situation. I've got to meet this bill payment. I've got to beat this thing. So I think a big lesson for people listening to this too is that I'm not a big fan of this burn to ships. Find a way to, I call it pay to play or pay to train. Figure out a way, and we'll talk about this a bit later on in buying and selling. Figure out a way to be paid while you're learning, so that you don't have that financial stress and pressure while you're going through to make something happen. Because you're much more likely to find that market that bites, or find that great website deal when you're not having to make the deal happen, because people can sense that, right? They sense that, and it makes a big difference. So that was a good realization on your part.
Yeah, well, I kept my day job throughout the whole period, and it's only this year that I've actually gone full time with this stuff. So it's a struggle. Like I was burning the candle both ends, but I knew very early on, and that if I was to make this about everything, if this was it, that things would fall apart very quickly, and I would get myself into a bit of trouble. Just lost the screen here.
Oh yeah, I'll do that while you're.
That's we're
back. We're back.
See, drummer. I use.
You're using the Magic Pad for the first time too, which is pretty darn cool.
Yeah. So back to, and it's a lot of pressure, but you've got to. And there's a thing. Dan Rain mentioned something that I heard early on in the piece, was that even at the level that people like Ed and Dan are, 9 things out of 10 don't necessarily bite that they test. It's all about testing and trial, and most things won't work. And then
the majority of stuff that we do does not work.
Yeah, and then something will bite, and then that will just maybe be a little bite, and then something else. So these are the guys. These guys are the best at what we're doing, and they're telling us that most of the stuff they test won't bite. So I thought, well, for me that's good enough for me. So
I provide some comfort.
Take as much pressure off myself as I can. But having that sort of level of debt I had with things, it was pressure, and I found it hard that when I was making money not to funnel it all into, I made a decision that debt was the first thing I'd clear, but I still needed that float to keep things going. Yes. Then I came across this wonderful idea.
One of my favorites.
And that changed everything for me, because all of a sudden I realized, wow, I can spend other people's money to make myself money. It was a concept that I'd never, was never on my radar, other than, leveraging debt and things like that, but to actually form these partnerships with people. So I started off with, friends running businesses that were quite cashed up, wanting to get into this market, and we would talk about, they would put up the money, invest, and then the profits we made would go to clearing their investment, and then we would share.
Yeah.
And that's how the system works. And the more I got into this and the more things developed, this is the business model now.
Yeah. The real estate, it's so funny because, this is real estate. I mean, these are classic real estate techniques. Just instead of a house, it's a website. And that to me makes, I think particularly, I think that makes it a bit more, if people think of it like real estate instead of like this some foreign thing, it makes it a lot easier, because a lot of the techniques that we talk about, right, make total sense when you're talking about real estate, but somehow people think because it's a website there's some sort of magic or voodoo involved and it doesn't apply, but it really does.
Yeah, because the thing is, we're not selling and buying websites. They're actual businesses that we're looking to build and buy and sell.
Great point.
So the next thing is, the why and the how. Why am I doing this? And I'll explain the process that I actually used to get to where I am today. Now, we've just touched on this. This virtual real estate, it's real. These are assets, they're properties, and this market's only going to get bigger. More and more businesses are coming online. Yellow Pages is no longer what the yellow. Google is new Yellow Pages, so businesses are online.
Yeah.
And to me, this was and still is the biggest opportunity online. I'm teaching my kids, teenagers, to get involved into this market. People that ask me, what is the best way to make money? For me, this still is, and it's not a short-term proposition. I don't see anything online as being sustainable sort of short-term income. This does take time, but to me, it's still the best opportunity there is. And the perfect place to get started, and where I did, was on Flipper. Now, Flipper did 80 million in sales last year. Low cost of entry. I started with nothing. Literally, I had the $19 fee for the listing.
Yeah,
that was my budget, and it's not too dissimilar to eBay. Like, coming from that eBay knowledge, we've all, particularly being musicians, we're always selling and buying on eBay, and to me, it was very similar auction process to eBay. It's safe and easy. Now, there's a lot of debate online from established website traders, talking about what is safety. But to me, I've had over 150 transactions, buying and selling on Flipper, and not one has gone belly up. There have been little hiccups and problems along the way, but I've not had one sale or purchase turn sour on me, and that's a lot of the process and how I vet things and how I actually go about buying and selling. But it's a simple step. My advice is start today. It's crucial to just open a Flipper account if you're interested in this market, because part of the buying and selling process is your online reputation, and a big asset, and this ties into all sort of web property as well, is time. So if you can open an account, and part of your ranking, authoritative ranking on Flipper is time. How long have you been a member of Flipper? So if you're considering this market, just jump on today, set up an account, and this is the key for me, starting small.
Oh, yes.
I started with making challenge websites that I was selling, and I actually started buying similar websites for the same thing of building up my feedback and reputation on Flipper as a great trader. So I would buy $50, $100 websites. Most of them I haven't done anything with, but that was just an investment in my online reputation. Was buying these. It's a tactic that a lot of people have used on eBay over the years. If you want to build yourself up as build a reputation as a trader, and starting small is great. It's a really good investment.
One of the things I find when people do start on Flipper, and they get a bit drunk on buying websites. Like, I remember having a consult with somebody who will remain nameless. They know who they are. And they very proudly showed me the 50-odd sites that they'd acquired on Flipper, and they were all great deals. And I said, what are you going to do with them?
Domaining.
And then we went, domaining is very much the same. And when we went actually through them, it was pretty embarrassing for I actually felt embarrassed, because usually my hard-ass routine was not, I just couldn't because it's a site. And actually, like, they had not had their hosting renewed and stuff like that. So the sites just didn't exist anymore. It was just a domain, and so it was just, you always have to, you need to feel your way in a market. You need to understand a market. And I remember back with the original Domination in 2006, one of the things which drove people nuts who bought the course, when I say drove people nuts, everybody loved the course, but it was like, if there was any negative feedback I got, was, why are you spending so much time telling us about what market should we be buying sites in, what ladder should we be putting our wall up against? Let's get to some sexy tactics and strategies. And I said, look, there's no shortage of these deals, buying or selling. So you've got to really understand what you're going to do with these things. You need to understand what the end goal is, as you said, before you do it. It's crazy not to.
Yeah, it's really about the psychology of the whole thing is really crucial, because there are so many things you can do with web properties, and they can serve so many different purposes for you. So you really need to know why you're buying what you're buying, what are you going to do with it, because if this doesn't scare people off hoarding, those renewals come around and they're expensive. If you've got $11, $12 for a year, more if you've got, like I bought a bunch of stuff about a year ago, and luckily they're earning a little bit of income, but there's a few $100 bill this week just on domain renewal.
Yes.
So you have to be careful of that stuff. And like you were saying, Ed, I know of people whose websites have just dropped because they've
just lost track.
And ignore the reminders about renewal, and you let it go long enough and they just disappear. You actually lose the website itself. So yeah, the end game is the crucial thing here. Now, this is borrowed from real world real estate. I suggest everyone just watch 100 auctions on Flipper before you dip your toes in. It's the best way to get a feel for what is actually going on, how the marketplace works, what actually doesn't work, the mistakes people are making, what people are doing right, and just get a feel for the whole thing, because you do want maximum return for your investment. I made, back to Daffy, I made a ton of mistakes when I started. Then, sort of halfway through the process, I did come across Dominique, and, that again put me back on track, and I had a system. But, start with 100 auctions is a great place to learn what's going on, and then when you're ready, you know what you're doing. This is a big thing, value. We touched on it briefly, and it's a question I often ponder. What actually is value? With web properties, value is in what you actually want to do to put your plan into action. Websites and domains have so many different uses. I mean, I buy, and people buy websites and domains purely for authority value that you can put into a cluster. You can buy sites, sites to flip to resell in a short period of time. I look for different criteria. Sites that I want to keep and turn into a long-term business. Again, I'm looking for different things. So you can't actually say this is the value. There are things tied into it. What product comes with the web property?
Content, ebooks, could be product.
A great thing I got from Dominique was ebooks are fantastic for renovating.
Yep.
And with today, with the ease of the fantastic tools available, creating product yourself is just, iPhone 4, I do a lot of my videos for my blog and audio product just on the iPhone.
Yep.
So creating product, but you need to know what you're actually going to do with the property before you buy it, because, what's great to me might not be worth anything to you for what you're wanting to do, because it's about the map and the plan. So when it comes to value, you just need to understand what is valuable to you.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah, once you work out what value to you is, it's easy to identify the gold, and Flipper is just full of golden opportunities if you know what you're looking for to put into action to fulfill your plan. Because the crucial thing is here, and this is why it's the best time to get in now, because people still aren't completely up to speed with what value is in a website. Now, if you come into the marketplace understanding all these value properties and due diligence and how to actually value the website and the cost of what you want to do with that website, you're in the driver's seat. You can buy things for less than most people would, and you can actually, when it comes time to sell, you can put yourself in a position, because the trick is conveying that value. As a seller, you need to educate almost buyers as to why this is what you're asking for, why that value is in there, and as a buyer, you actually know how to spot these bargains. So it's just full of opportunity. So understand the whole value process, work out what your plan is, and then just put that into action, because Flipper is just there's something like 14,000 listings on at the moment. I saw a couple of days ago. So there's opportunity there.
Yes.
Now, with the process itself, we touched on this earlier again, you're selling the business, not the site. To me, website is just a bit of code on a page and a domain, but we're interested in businesses. Just Ed, you've talked about like running coffee shops, and the same rules apply online. It's a business. You want to build up customer base, and you want to sell them either a service or a product. So when it comes time to, when you're selling these web properties, sell it like you would a business. So you need all your reporting up to date. As a buyer, I don't tend to touch sites that are less than 6 months old, because I want to see consistent history of sales, traffic, because it's very easy to spike these things. So you want to see it spread over time. And again, you've just got to work out what your business plan is and how these things fit into it. But as a seller, you're actually selling business. And the key to all this is, and if you study Flipper enough, the sites that sell are the ones earning income. Even a site selling, I don't know, if you're generating $40 a month in income, then that's almost $1,000 site. And it's not that hard once a site does find its market and bites to earn that sort of income. When you're selling things like a buyer, would you buy your website if you're in the marketplace? And that's how I look at things all the time. It's, I don't want to be scammed. I don't want to be ripped off, and nor do I want to do the same. Because that's the thing with the internet. Once something's online, it's there forever. So you need to, your brand reputation, you need to be very careful with.
You're only as good as your last transaction. You rip somebody off, and you sunk online. You really are.
Now, when selling, the key is this pitch, the sales letter. Now, if you consider, like I just said before, there are 14,000 listings on at the moment. The headline for me is crucial, and that comes back down to old school copywriting. You need to stand out from the crowd. There are things you can do on Flipper. You can all these add-ons, but they to put you on the front page, to just like on eBay, bold headings and underline. But again, the key is headline. When you're thinking of buyers are searching through that, it's like newspapers. You just want the headline to grab. So I suggest, I did it. John Carlton sort of copywriting stuff's a great place to start. Just learn copywriting. It's if you're wanting to play in this market seriously, you have to. Copywriting is the skill.
It'd almost be to me, it's copywriting is a great skill regardless of what you're doing in business. I think if there's one thing that I'd recommend any person in business study a little bit of is copywriting. And there are great free sources on the web like Gary Halbert's letters and stuff like that, which are entertaining, and of course not really referring to online, but that actually doesn't mean the same techniques all apply. To me, it's probably I'd go as far as saying it's the one key skill, because if you figure out how to be able to persuade people or get people, you're fighting for attention all the time. So if you know how to what you can do, you're at least giving yourself a fighting chance. Those guys will teach you, of course, is to, as you say, that's why you're watching those 100 auctions. Don't sit there passively watch it. Go, check, watch that auction, check. No. Oh, that one, look, that's a website that was created a month ago. It doesn't have any income or anything, but it sold for $170, and this other one sold for $40. Let's look at the copy. Let's look at the headline. That's what worked. You want to get cut out headlines that seem to work on auctions that worked.
Oh, I've kept a swipe file. Yeah. Great headlines.
Well, the swipe file, just to explain that for people who may not have heard the term, it is literally like either in the old days, it literally was a filing cabinet where you would keep all your old direct mail copy and ads and stuff, anything that's good just as inspiration and, be able to learn great techniques. Online now, you've got all sorts of opportunities. You can use Evernote, like we taught in Challenge, or you can use all sorts of things to collate copy. Anytime you see a good bit of copy, you should be grabbing it. This is why it drives me insane when I get people, anybody who's on my mailing list, you'd think, I would like to hope, is interested in marketing. That's what. So it drives me banana-rama when I get an email saying, "Oh, why are you pitching this thing, or why are you selling this thing?" And I'm saying, well, one, it's because I think it's good. Like, I won't just do it for its rubbish sake. But two, even if you've got no interest, and that's totally up to you. You've got, I'm not forcing with a gun to your head to buy something. But for goodness sake, don't you think it might be a good idea to at least watch the launch? What's the first video about? What's the second video about? What's the third video about? What are they actually hitting? Because if you watch, they're all the same. They're all, there's a very, very, very standard theme. You can educate yourself immensely for $0 if you literally take the time to be actively looking at stuff and actively looking at those 100 auctions in this case, rather than just passively going, oh yeah, check, got it, and move on. That's not what we're talking about here, right?
You need to learn from it. And tying into that again is in your sales letter, tell the story. Everyone likes a good story, and when selling web properties, I always like the ones that, when I was doing the 100 auction search, the ones that really stuck with me were telling a story, because as a buyer, I want to be sure that I'm not going to be swindled. Now, your story needs to be authentic. So when I say story, you tell a story about why you're here, why you're selling. Please don't do the thing that you see with so many times, which is, I have a major project that I need funds. I'm getting rid of all my web properties. You see that a lot. But with a story, the reason you're selling, you say, I built up this business, and this is why I'm, giving you the opportunity to take it over, and tell the story of how you developed the site, where it came from, where it is now, how you got there. You know, you have to be really transparent with stuff. But, have all your reporting up to date and thorough. Like, you need all your traffic stats, and you know, I remember watching the original Domination, the talk of, you know, back in the day, you didn't give away too much because it was so easy to take. Today, that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So
I think it's actually worth expanding on that point just a little bit, because you know, particularly for people who may have seen Domination or heard, like, the most massive difference, and why I think buying and selling is really taking off now, is because it's a lot easier to facilitate the transaction. It's safe to do in an environment like, you know, as long as you do your due diligence, etc., etc. But compared to the old days, because in the old days when traffic was super easy, people would literally take your listing, copy it, and, you know, like, people used to sell their stuff on eBay, and it was just disastrous because, you know, people would literally just take everything, throw up some 5 cents Google AdWords, get stacks of traffic to it, and literally people would see their profits plummet overnight, literally. Now traffic's hard, so, you know, getting good traffic, it's hard or expensive, take your pick, and which is great. That's fantastic. That's what it should be. And to me, that is why it makes, you know, why we've seen a real buying and selling renaissance, so to speak, because we're getting that sort of ease of, you know, that you don't have to be secretive, so you really have the opportunity to tell a story. You're not pulling your punches, so to speak, when you're selling in your site.
Exactly. And in the story, in the sales letter, and this comes back to studying the 100 auctions again, is I try and answer every question in the actual sales letter, because if you study Flipper for a while, you'll see some sales just have comments after comments and people asking questions that really should be, you know, already answered in your sales pitch. So I've made a point, and consequently when I list stuff, I get very few questions in the comments section, and if I do get any private messages, this is a great tip, I actually answer that in the comment section so that everyone can see the question and the answer, so it saves time, because again, we're all time poor.
Yes.
And you don't want to spend, you know, hours responding to questions online when you should have answered pretty much everything. You know, there'll be some things that you can't cover, but you should have 99.9% of everything covered in your sales letter.
Yeah.
And, you know, the crucial thing at the end of everything is to get feedback all along the way, because you want to build your, you know, Flipper reputation. So feedback is crucial. So make sure you ask for it.
That's such a key point too, when you're asking for, you know, literally ask for it. You know, the third rule of John Carlton's very simple laws of copywriting is that you have to tell people what to do next. You know, if your communication if you don't have some sort of telling people what to do next, then your communication will lack the punch. If that's truly what you want to do, you have to tell them specifically. Don't assume that they're going to do it. Don't hope that they're going to do it. You must tell them specifically what you want, and ask. You know,
exactly, yeah.
And ask for the feedback. Ask for the, you know, recommendations.
Because the end of my sales letters, when I'm dealing with, I call it the shallow end of Flipper, that sort of $1,000 sub market.
Yes.
I like using the Buy It Now facility, and now I will actually tell people, and, you know, if you want this, click Buy It Now. And there are things you can do in your sales letter, offer bonuses and incentives for people to actually click on that button. Things like bonus product. I make videos on how to actually run the site, installation, what happens post-sale. So I tend to include everything in the sales letter, what is actually going to happen. No, I've documented this whole process, and we'll talk a bit later, and, you know, I put a course together that goes really into depth with the actual sales and buying process step by step, and I take, you know, documented the whole process. So it's a simple process, but there are a lot of little steps that if you can take them in the actual sales process, you avoid hassles afterwards, because the big thing is knowing what happens afterwards. You want to avoid, and that's why I have so few problems, because it's established in the beginning. So you will get this will happen, and this won't happen.
It's funny you talk about eBay auctions. When I used to do those selling, you know, guitars, I still do the occasional one. I would have to put this special section about here's the delivery costs. If you order this from overseas, you could be hit with customs. That's not my responsibility. You learn all these sorts of things that you have to, and if you handle them up front, no issues. But if you, heaven help you if you leave something out. And I remember in particular, we've got this crazy situation, Australia being a very large country, and Western Australia being right over the other side of the country, a bit like Los Angeles is to New York. But it really is like, and it's insane to get anything shipped over to Western Australia. It actually costs more to ship a guitar to Western Australia than it does to get it shipped to the United States. It's ridiculous. Anyway,
there's a great Brady drums manufacturer in Perth, and to get things across from Western Australia to Melbourne, it's really, really expensive, and it's quicker to get things from the States as well.
Yeah, that's right. No, that's right. It is really, and I got so sick of answering emails from people from Western Australia saying, "Oh, I can't believe you're charging them." And I said, oh, initially I'd answer back in single emails and say, "Look, go and check the prices yourself. I'm not making money off the shipping. It's just how much it costs." And so in the end, I literally had to have a little Western Australian section in my international listing saying, if you're from Western Australia, suck it up now. Or you happily use your own courier, but you do. And it saves you so much time and effort. Every single one of those is kept and used for the next, the next auction.
Yeah, and look, the next step for me was, Flipper isn't the whole buying and selling universe. It's a fantastic place to start, and it's a great place to build your buying and selling business, but there are so many other opportunities. But I suggest to everyone to really cut your teeth on Flipper, learn how this all works, and really get a handle on anything, and then the opportunities are just endless. I mean, I made a point early on to build a list of all my buyers and sellers so that I could sell and buy direct. So if there were, I could match buyers and sellers. So if sellers were coming to me saying, I've got this site I want to sell. Do you know anyone? So for a fee,
what a great idea.
I would just be matching them. Then buyers would come to me saying, look, I like that style of site. I want more for my network. So then I would go to my sellers list, and it's a great way to build yourself a business. Direct approach for me worked well. I would find websites and just Google search, finding websites that I had website that same market that was outranking them or coming up. You could sell to them, because for me the easiest way to outrank your competition is to buy them. So if I had a website that was in position 1, I'd go to the people underneath me and say, here it is. You can either buy it, you can lease it from me, or lead generation, something I got into with local businesses, is websites in position 1. You can pay to have your phone number as the contact number, and people will ring you about this product or service, and that's been working really well.
Yeah.
And the great thing is, if they don't want it,
somebody else,
the guy below will, and it works.
And again, to hark back to the real estate analogy, the best property deals, anybody who's done any sort of investing knows, if you're reading the equivalent of the classified ads in whatever your major newspaper is that has it, like here in Melbourne in Australia, it's the the Age Saturday is the big that's where everybody puts their house for sale ad, and I'm sure you'll have the equivalent in whatever your local town is. But property investors know if the house actually hits that ad, it's not a good deal, right? It's fully priced out, and it's fully the time to approach it is when the developers have actually just submitted their new development for approval. You have somebody on the council who gives you a heads up, and you go to the developer and say, hey, look, can I take some of these off your hands? Developer's happy because they're it's early days for them, and they've got some security. It makes it easy to fund and finance the property if they've got sales, etc. And you get it at such a low price. You've really built in a huge margin of safety in that purchase, and it's a win for everybody. Same goes for for sites. I know that the best practitioners, particularly when it comes to building content clusters, which is something people hear about a lot this year, where you're effectively buying high authority sites with very high PR so that you can provide yourself high PR backlinks. It's about the only method that you can use now to get decent high PR backlinks, apart from doing the important market leadership type approach and strategy. And so buying websites and age domains in that area is essential. And, the people basically approach, they find these, they see these PR 6 and 7, these diamonds in the coal, 5 pages down in Google, and it's a professor who did an iPod study like 8 years ago, and they've forgotten about it probably. They did it while they were still at university, and they're now off, and they approach them and say, look, do you mind if it, and people can't get, why do you want to buy my website? It doesn't make any money.
It's amazing how responsive people are.
Oh, yeah.
On both sides, buyers and sellers.
One thing on that strategy, though, that's so crucial and such a big mistake that people make in that is that whenever somebody approaches you to, if you get a phone call out of the blue, I want to buy your business, people always take that call, right? There's nobody in history does not take that call. However, the big mistake I think people make is that they don't pre-frame the person with the worth of their business. Because if you get that call, if you're on the receiving end of a phone call like that, I want to buy your website, instantly every protection mechanism that you've had in 40 million years of genetics kicks in. Oh, what if I sell it to why does he want it? What's the story? What's it going?
Am I going to get ripped off?
Yeah, is he going to rip me off? Is he going to, it literally you go into overdrive. And your job as the potential buyer in this circumstance is to super pre-frame the seller so that they don't feel like an idiot when they present product. Because if you just say, hey, what do you want? Inevitably they name a ridiculous price. Not because they want the ridiculous price,
I have no idea.
but because they're terrified they're going to get ripped off. So they name a ridiculous price. So, you pre-frame them and you before you even get to the question of how much do you want for your site, you show them a whole bunch of other sites that are sold for reasonable amounts, amounts that you're prepared to pay. And, you explain why without going into detail, why you're acquiring these sites and buying these sites. And you pre-frame them doing that, because that to me is the number one mistake in the approach option I think people make, is that they don't take the time to educate the person who's selling the website as to the value of their website.
Because imagine getting that call, you're just, website you've forgotten about, and someone rings it out of the blue, I want to buy your website, what do you want for it? So, I have a website. Oh, yeah, that would...
Well, it's funny, when... it's funny you should mention this. When I sold IQ Media, this back in the gogo.com days, we got that call, and basically we were tossing up figures. We were like, well, everybody asks for $1 million these days, so that's not good enough. So we'll say, $3.5 million. And we got a fax back half an hour later saying that was accepted. So, on that basis, we probably should have asked for 10. But still, we were very happy, of course. We were thrilled with that. But it was, you're totally unprepared for that. And so it does make a big difference.
It does. That all ties into, again, this. Last year, the big thing for me was market leadership, and that came out of the last challenge. And I, again, harping back to the beginning when I said, to me, systems are crucial. And remember, you were talking about, you said something like 18 months you spent testing and developing this market leader strategy. Yeah. And I thought, well, okay, I'm one for the following the map. I'll give it a go. And it really, I kicked big goals with it. I built up my blog, which was tradingwebsitesblog.com, which is all about my experience in buying and selling websites. Just went through the roof using market leadership techniques and such, and it's at a point now where I'm getting people asking me to consult on their buying and selling deals. Come in and say, just consult, and that's purely because I've positioned myself as, I don't like the word expert, but just as, I feed my community.
Somebody who's enthusiastic about the market and the community.
And I'm sharing information. That's what market leadership basically is. It's
absolutely. It's not about expertise. Often, the market leader is not the best expert.
That's being fun almost.
Yeah, it absolutely is. It's such a hard bill of goods to sell market leadership. Like, imagine the product. Hey, we've got I've got this great. check out the new awesome internet marketing system.
You almost wish there's a better word for it.
Yeah, roll up. You know, here's what you need to do. You basically need to create great content pretty much, you know, 6 or 7 days a week, you know, 365 days of the year. You know, you have to have zero expectation of making any money. You know,
at least
at least 12 months, and you probably, you know, it's, you know, you can't, and the moment you start expecting that you think you might make money, you won't make money. This is just, it's such a horror. Yeah,
and then the trolls turn up.
You can't sell that. That's right. Oh yeah, and by the way, that's right. It's, you know, a couple of months in, no doubt you'll offend somebody, and they will attack you in the most vicious and malicious and anonymous way possible. Yeah. You know, this is also, and it's an impossible thing to sell. It's not. I don't think I could ever do a product and market leadership per se,
because passionate about the market you're in.
You have to be, and all these things. You know, so it's the complete opposite of a magic bullet system.
It is.
Having said that, it works.
It does work, and it works a treat. And it's been
So I'm glad, you know, you're here on the call today, just, you know, explaining to people.
Yeah, it's a big part of the reason why I am where I am today. And look, brokering is the next. I see this as a massive.
Yes.
Again, not my idea, one that I stole from you, Ed, but it's you know, I see it as being a massive opportunity in this market. You see what Kenny Goodman's doing with you know, brokering domain sales, and look, you understand, we either have cash or time, and you'll be surprised at how many people have a lot of cash but just no time, and that's where you come in. And also, you've got to take out the, I know Ed, you talk about it as well, saying take out the emotion. Like, I'm getting to a point now where there's things coming on board. I don't want to get involved in the deal because, you know, emotion takes over. So if you can have a broker or a negotiator come in for you and you tell them, look, these are the guidelines, this is what I want to be the end result, go and do it for me and come back to me when it's done. Because emotion's the killer.
Yes.
Like with any decision, if emotion's involved, you make the wrong choice.
It's likely to be a poorer decision than if it's one that's unemotional. And you know how we started off when we talked about being paid to play or paid to train. Brokering is a wonderful way, I think, of learning skills and getting paid for it. And, you know, again, look at, you know, business brokering, look at real estate brokering. What is, you know, they're huge businesses. Why there's going to be the Century 21 of you know, internet business brokers. There's going to be, you know, in Australia, the Rain and Horn. There's going to be there's going to be these big inverted commas equivalents of the business broker or the real estate agent for online. It just has to happen.
Yeah, because you think about it, everyone's coming online. Like Kenny talks about, you know, his strategy is putting himself in so many niches where he's dominating, because in the next 5 years, you know, the big players with, and we're talking with their billions, are coming online, and if you're already there established and recognized as a player in this market, you're going to get a lot of work, because people will be coming, like in the real estate, they'll be coming to the reputable traders and, you know, saying, this is what we need to do, you know, do it for us. It's a fantastic opportunity. And coming, you know, back full circle to where we started from with Daffy, you know, the course I mentioned, which is BBS Formula, which I put together with a couple of friends, David Jennings and Ryan Malone, who also Melbourne boys, but have done some incredible stuff in this buying and selling field. We got together one day and said, you know, we're all working on different projects, and said, why don't we just pull together, because we have similar stories of how we've come into this market. And, you know, David Jennings has made a killing in the stock trading product niche, and he made a decision that, you know, buying and selling websites is where I want my business to go, because it's such a great opportunity. So what we've done, basically, the three of us got together and just documented the process of how we started and got to where we are today, and, you know, created this product, BBS Formula, which is the Buy, Build, Sell Formula. It's an online course of 7 modules, and we even, you know, it takes us through the whole process of starting from scratch, or if you've got an established portfolio, of how to actually build this online business. And actually, you know, the trading web properties is a business. And we actually even got Kenny Goodman along to present one of the modules on, you know, buying and selling domains. So it's packed. And for anyone that's gone through the challenge, this is really that next step. If you're wanting to get into, you know, buying and selling web properties, because all those challenge skills are part of the process. You know, it actually is, you implement all those skills into the buying sense. It's not like the challenge is something that, you know, is out there and it's something to learn, move on. It's actually, you know, Ed and everyone, the crew have set it up that, you know, this is scalable. So the challenge is set up, you know, the way as past challenge, it was to make that $1 so it's scaled right down, and that's the beauty that when I discovered, oh wow, the same rules apply. You just take those criteria figures and blow them up, and that challenge becomes scalable, and that's how I, you know, run my business on those principles. And, you know, today, you know, the offer we've got with BBS Formula, we're giving away, you know, a bunch of bonus material. You know, there's almost $500 worth of stuff we're, you know, putting up today. You know, Dave Jennings has his course that he's putting up, which is the SEO method, which is his process of actually building SEO, which ties in again to, because, you know, the challenge with the constrictions, you can't go so into
we have to teach basically one approach, and there are many approaches.
And this again, it expands on the SEO that was touched in the challenge.
David is actually going to be speaking at the Melbourne Challenge Conference, which I don't know if by the time you hear this will either be on or it'll be starting. Well, it's next week for us here, and you know, one of the reasons I asked him to come along, I mean, he's a bit of a machine, the old David. He makes me feel tired. You know, he really does.
Oh, he's I call him the Energizer Bunny. You switch him on and
he really is a good implementer. But I think the two things there, and
so that he's also offering his outsourcing workshop.
See, now that's what I was going to say.
That's what talking about at the challenge.
He is going to talk about that at the conference, because as people know here, you know, I'm such a big. That's one of the things. Building a team, whether that's, you know, using outsourcing or, you know, is one of our big themes for this year. We'll be getting people to build teams of some description or another. Whether you use, you know, even using somebody on Fiverr with 2 R's.
Well, I started on Fiverr. Fiverr.com.
And it's amazing, you know, some of the innovative ways people have used outsourcing in buying and selling websites, for example, like getting websites. You know, we call it the field, you know, the farm and the field philosophy, right? You plant all these websites. You get your team members to build a whole bunch of websites for you, build backlinks to them, let them mature in the field. The big mistake people make on Flipper, I think, is that they build these sites and they list them 2 days later.
Yeah.
Now, unbelievably, that used to work.
There are a few people still doing it,
and it's actually come back a bit. I would say, you know, it's still, people are still buying websites. But if you want to get that extra, you know, that extra lot of value, if you just let them literally plant them, put them in the field so they get some ranking, they get some traffic, maybe a couple of dollars in AdSense sales, because that's such a key thing. You know, getting the extra dollar just makes a big difference, you know, in terms of the price that you can get for a website. You know, you can have, you know, a team member building that for you, and, you know, you can have somebody full time these days for $13.50 a day. Yeah, that's.
I started off paying $50 a week for someone working full time, and they were doing all the things that are repeatable, that you don't have, that you shouldn't be doing. Mm-hmm. And it's easy, like with programs like Jing and ScreenFlow, you just record how you do it, send them the video link.
Was Pete Williams speaking at that outsourcing conference as
that weekend?
Well? He was because, and again, this is going to be at the Challenge conference. That was a fantastic, and because I've actually asked the lads to both come and speak, because some of the techniques that they have in it. So that's a really good, you know, that was a 2-day course or something, wasn't it?
It was a weekend course.
Yeah. So that's the whole. All of that is part of the thing. But
I've also got Mike Rhodes' AdWords Bootcamp, which is a great product in itself.
Funnily enough, happens to also be speaking at the Melbourne Challenge site. This is not a setup. This is not a setup.
And the reason we have these because they actually tie into the course itself.
Yeah, they're not just filling out.
I mean,
stuff.
I actually use the SEO method as part of my strategy. So, you know, they're not just things we've thrown in.
Yeah.
They actually, you know, they're part of the program. So
Now, just if we go back, because we'll just, so if people go to www.challenge.co/blog/BBS, which is all capitals formula, you'll get the special deal. And of course, we will, here at challenge.co get a small affiliate payment, which we promise to use probably to do some form of practical joke on Rob Somerville, because there's nothing funnier than playing a practical joke on Guru Bob. I mean, it really is. He's just, his reactions, his laughs, it just cracks him up. So we'll do something grand with that. The deal is, what's the course go for? Because I think people are worried about the fact that this is going to be a couple of grand or something.
It's $20,000. No, it's $397.
$300. Yeah. So yeah, very, very reasonably.
It's affordable.
Yeah. It really is a good, like, if this is something, the way I think of this is it's a good step. Like, if you got a taste for selling a website in the challenge, or this is something that really intrigues you, this is the great next step. It is,
and it's me being a former challenger, just basically recording the process of how I moved from the challenge into this and turned it into a business. So there's no fluff or magic. It's just an actual, in fact, coalface. This is how we actually do it.
Given what you've put in there, that is phenomenal value. So definitely, look, I don't need to pitch you guys. We really wanted to get Danny in here today to give you guys some inspiration about all of this. But that's a pretty phenomenal deal given those bonuses as well. So look, Danny, thank you very, very much. Thank you to Warner Brothers for the generous use of their logos. And
it took a few emails to get permission.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you very much for that. And we really appreciate you guys listening. And I hope you'd like us to do more of these webinars with challenges. Challenges done good is really, I find it very inspiring. I love listening in other, like, one of my favorite podcasts is Creative Screenwriter. And I'm not interested in screenwriting per se. I find the process fascinating, but I'm not really going to write a movie anytime soon. But what I love about it is it's all these famous and really good screenwriters. They interview everybody, and it's all about their breaking in, how they started, what are their processes, what are their habits. And that, to me, is something that I find extraordinarily interesting as well. So, if you are interested, go and check out challenge.co/blog/BBS Formula. Thank you very, very much for attending this evening. Thank you, Danny, for being part of this today.
Oh, thank you for having me on. I like telling that story because I've met a few challengers that have done incredible things, and it's great to be able to share. And thank you for having me.
No worries at all. All right, thank you, everybody. Thank you, ball boys, girls, and everybody else. And we will speak to you real soon.